Fellow Ghanaians, good morning. It's been exactly a week ago today when we witnessed yet another disgraceful moment in what is becoming an increasingly disturbing pattern, the violent assault of Joy News journalist Carlos Kaloni and his eyewitness interviewee at the hands of soldiers while they were on duty covering the demolition of a warehouse right in Accra. These two individuals were not criminals. They were not lawbreakers. They were not threats to national security. They were simply civilians. One, a trained journalist and his cameraman, and the other, an ordinary Ghanaian citizen simply engaging in constitutionally protected activity, seeking and speaking truth to power. Yet the soldiers involved acted as though journalism were treason, as though asking questions and filming public events has suddenly become a national security threat. The two were manhandled, detained without due process, and just brutalized. And all of this happening in the name of maintaining so-called order. A word that in this context has become silencing the people. Since this incident, not a single name of a soldier involved has been made public. No officer has been sanctioned, and as always, we are told that this matter is being investigated. That kind of brazen impunity, if allowed to fester, consequence, is not just an attack on press freedom, it's a direct insult to the very concept of a democratic republic. Make no mistake, this is not an isolated incident. Only a few months ago, we saw terrifying and almost surreal military operation unfold in Ashaman, where soldiers stormed the community in a retaliatory raid after one of their colleagues had reportedly been killed by unknown criminals. Instead of a surgical investigation or a lawful pursuit of the suspects, what followed was a wholesale indiscriminate crackdown. Men were dragged from trotro bus stops, people were rounded up from their homes, others were beaten on the streets without a charge or without a reason. And shops were even ordered to shut down. The entire community was plunged into fear, as if a state of emergency had been declared without any legal basis. And what came of that? Were the victims ever compensated? Were the perpetrators ever named? Was any officer court-martialed or sanctioned in public? Absolutely not. That story, like many others, faded from headlines with no justice, no accountability, and no national reflection on how this could happen in a constitutional democracy. Then came yet another haunting incident, this time in Yinehim in the Ashanti region, where a military convoy encountered a funeral procession. The soldiers noticed a young man wearing military fatigue, a fashion choice really. However, ill-advised, that is not a criminal offense in and of itself. And without hesitation, without any dialogue, and without regard for life, one of the soldiers allegedly cocked his weapon and shot the man dead right on that spot. After some brief altercation, the Ghana Police Service issued a brief statement saying they were working with the military to identify the officer involved. But as the months have passed, that promise has also vanished into thin air. No name has been released, no hearing announced, no charges filed. The family of the deceased remain in mourning and in darkness, waiting for justice that may never come. So the question we must ask honestly and urgently is this: what kind of country allows its soldiers to routinely brutalize citizens, assault journalists, kill unarmed citizens, and just walk away untouched? Whose streets are these? And when those trained to serve and protect begin to see themselves as the law, the judge and the executioner, then this creeping, unaccountable militarization of civilian spaces is not only a blatant violation of our laws and constitutional rights, it is deeply terrifying. It signals that a social contract which binds us together as a democratic society is being shredded. That sacred bargain which ensures that citizens are sovereign and security forces are subordinate to civilian authority is collapsing right before our very eyes. Why has this impunity continued unchecked for so long? It is because we allow this culture within our security services, which often prioritizes secrecy over transparency. Whenever soldiers are accused of wrongdoing, we are told that the matter will be addressed internally. But what does this really mean in practice? It means no names, no records, and no timelines, and then no accountability. It means families of victims are left to chase shadows while the perpetrators continue to wear the uniform. It means a soldier can slap, beat, or even kill you and I, and still be saluted the next morning as if nothing happened. And because our legal structures and the institutional system allow this dualism to persist. Soldiers are governed by a separate legal code under the Armed Forces Act and internal military procedures, which often place them beyond the reach of civilian courts. What this has come to mean is that when a soldier kills a civilian in a non-combatant situation, the matter is not treated as a normal criminal offense in the same way it would be if any ordinary Ghanaian had done the same. It becomes instead a service matter, an internal affair. And so even deadly violence disappears into bureaucratic black hole where the heels of justice eventually stop turning. This is not just a legal loophole, it is a moral crisis. When soldiers assault journalists, they don't just inflict bodily harm, they damage the very foundation of democracy by attacking the free press. When they brutalize citizens on mere suspicion, they send a clear message that the people are not sovereign, that they are subordinates. And when they kill someone for wearing a military camouflage and no one is held to account, they create a national atmosphere of terror, one which the uniform is no longer a symbol of protection, but of fear. And ladies and gentlemen, fellow Ghanaians, if we allow this culture to take roots, we are telling ourselves that some lives matter more than others, that the uniform absorbs one of guilt, that civilian deaths can be excused, overlooked, or even forgotten. And in doing so, we erode the very essence of our citizenship. Our Constitution says power resides in the people, you and I. But in these cases, it appears power resides in the barrel of a gun. And once people trusted this army, in times of flood, fire, and danger, soldiers were welcomed as saviors. But today, for many Ghanaians, that trust is evaporating. The same military uniform that once inspired confidence are now met with anxiety and dread. Communities fear that a casual encounter with soldiers could lead to injury, imprisonment, or even death. That is not how a democratic country should function. And then we must begin to do a couple of things to stop this. We must insist as a non-negotiable starting point that every case of civilian harm involving soldiers be investigated by an independent body, not behind military walls, not by the soldiers themselves. These commissions must be empowered with prosecutorial authority. They must have access to subpoena and be required to publish full reports with timelines and recommendations. The days of handling these matters internally must come to an end. When soldiers act outside of combat and violate the rights of civilians, particularly in peaceful settings, they must face justice in civilian courts. Their uniforms must never serve as a shield against accountability. Ghana must be a country where no one is above the law, not even those who carry arms on our behalf. The Armed Forces Act must be reviewed and amended to align fully with the democratic values enshrined in our Constitution. Internal disciplinary processes must include transparency mechanisms and external oversight. And our parliament must stop looking away and stop looking inward, because silence in the face of brutality is complicity. We also need to establish a victim support framework that guarantees the right to counsel, compensation, and timely justice for families that have been impacted by some of these violence. Too many victims, too many times, are left without recourse. Too many families are buried in grief and silence. Fellow Ghanaians, let's be clear. We are not calling for chaos. We are not inciting disrespect for our uniformed forces. They are doing well. They are protecting us. That is not what we are asking for. We are calling for constitutional order. We are calling for the restoration of dignity, restraint, and justice. Soldiers must remain what they were trained to be, protectors of the Republic, not predators in the streets. Journalists, those of us who choose to do this job, must remain what democracy requires, watchdogs, not prey. And civilians must remain what the Constitution proclaims us to be, sovereign citizens, not collateral damage. The transformation we need is not simply institutional, it is moral and constitutional. A society that tolerates military impunity is one that permits justice to be murdered in broad daylight. We must choose better, we must demand more. Let this segment mark the beginning of that demand. And fellow Ghanaians, hopefully, in the coming years and in the coming months, we don't come back with these same stories of military brutalities. Good morning and enjoy the rest of the show.